Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Manook. I'm a solutions consultant here at FileMaker, and I'm really excited to be your host for today's Deploy Your Custom App webinar, where you're going to learn the essential steps and best practices in deploying your first custom app with material taken from the Deploy Custom App Success Guide. But before we get started, let's cover a few brief housekeeping notes. So for the best experience, it is strongly recommended that you participate in this webinar with at least a broadband connection. If you have any problems or require online assistance at any time, please contact Citrix Technical Support at 888-259-8414. Now, throughout today's presentation, you're going to have the opportunity to type in and ask questions, so let's talk briefly about how to do that. Just go to the control panel, click on the question section, enter your question, and click on send. Now, we'll try to answer as many as time allows at the end of our presentation, but remember, you don't need to wait until then to submit a question. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Ryan Klenk. Now, Ryan is a technical lead at MainSpring, a FileMaker Business Alliance partner based out of Maryland.
Thank you, Ryan. So as Ryan mentioned, I'm Ryan Klenk. I'm the technical lead at MainSpring, based out of Towson, Maryland. We're an IT strategy and consulting firm. We have a fantastic FileMaker development team. I'm a FileMaker certified developer for versions 11 through 14 and an authorized trainer. We really love doing the training classes for FileMaker, everything from the introduction classes all the way up to the certification classes, the ones where people are aiming to be certified developers. So we'll get into it here. I'd like to start by showing you kind of a bird's eye view of the three guides in this series. It's not an accident that the diagram is a loop, because custom app development is often cyclical. In fact, we often tell our clients that it's a continuum. You plan, you create, you deploy, and then eventually you start planning changes to your custom app because your business will keep changing and your app can too. Today, we're going to be talking about the last step in this series, deploy. For those of you that prefer a visual map to the series, here's what the three guides look like at a glance and a URL to take you to all three. That's that, filemaker.com/custom app guides. And here's an overview of what we'll be covering today. We'll be covering hosting your app, considering data sources. We'll help you figure out what you need to buy. We'll determine a deployment strategy, a backup strategy, talk about disaster recovery, and what you should talk to your system administrator about. So what is deployment? What exactly are we talking about when we talk about deployment? Deployment is the process of making your custom app available to your team or organization, and additionally, maintaining the infrastructure needed to do so. Now, while much of the execution for deployment happens after the create phase, the process really begins in the plan phase. Things like defining the environment will directly impact your work and influence what you do in plan and create. For example, when we talk about accommodating iOS users, that's something that you'll want to think about for deployment, but we also need to design the system for that. An iOS user may require layouts that are smaller with larger buttons and text. When we talk about potentially accessing via the web, that's another thing that you may need to plan for and account for in your create phase. You're designing a system that is less frills than one that you might design for FileMaker Pro access. You may also want to think about things like, should your users be able to connect from the road? Do we need to integrate with any other systems? Basically, this phase is certainly not siloed off from the other two. It's right there integrated with each of them. Aside from the implications deployment has on those two phases, starting your planning for this early means you'll have the full scope of hardware and software requirements in your view well ahead of deployment, and that'll make budgeting for your app significantly easier. Good preparation and planning for the deployment phase is going to save you quite a few headaches later on. So the first thing to think about when planning your deployment is hosting. A big piece of this puzzle deals with a product called FileMaker Server. FileMaker Server is the engine that allows you to easily share the custom app that you've built. You can install this on really any machine that meets the requirements. Often we see people use Mac Minis or regular spare PCs as their FileMaker Server machine. any computer will work as long as it meets the requirements. And we'll discuss what those requirements are a little bit later. Now, it's possible to share your app using FileMaker Pro. That's called peer-to-peer sharing. And I would warn against peer-to-peer sharing for all but the most casual of uses. FileMaker Server is going to give you the availability, administrative capabilities, and features critical to sharing data within a team. A lot of what we'll be discussing today is specific to FileMaker Server. So once your app is hosted via FileMaker Server, you'll be able to connect to it using FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Pro Advanced. If you've had the chance to check out the Create Guide, you know that FileMaker Pro and Pro Advanced is also what you use in order to create these custom apps. So it's both the consumption and creation of your apps. You can also connect to your custom app via FileMaker Go. FileMaker Go is an iOS app, a native iOS app developed by FileMaker that allows you to use either your apps locally or connect to a hosted app on FileMaker Server. It's a very nice, slick utility. And finally, you can also access via the web using FileMaker WebDirect or custom web publishing. WebDirect is a fantastic piece of technology that takes your app and translates it to the web. It doesn't require a great deal of effort, and you don't have to know any extra web programming or do or a lot of extra development. We find this technology is perfect for those occasions when you may be at a desktop without FileMaker Pro installed, or maybe using a mobile device without FileMaker Go. We still find the best experience comes from FileMaker Pro and Go. It's just WebDirect works fantastically when that's not really an option. Custom web publishing, on the other hand, is a feature that allows you to connect to your hosted database via the FileMaker PHP API or XML calls. So that's essentially, it's a whole separate programming language. Using it, you can integrate your custom app into your website in a really seamless way. In the past, we've used this technology to help clients get things like inventory information from their app to their website in real time. There is no import process or routine for them. It's as simple as making an update in FileMaker and having it reflect on the site. And you're certainly not limited to that. That said, it's significantly more complicated to use. Let's take a look at the FileMaker Server's admin console and take a look at how we might actually share an app out with FileMaker Server. So I'm going to hide this PowerPoint here, or this keynote here. And I'm going to open up a database that I have just right on my desktop, this little contacts app. Now this is just a starter solution that FileMaker gives us with FileMaker Pro 15. You can access it by going to File and then Get Started. You'll have the option to get it there. But it's just the contacts app, and it's just right on my desktop right now. It's not hosted out or shared out or anything of that nature. So right now, if my coworker wanted to access this system, they would not be able to. So let's fix that. I'm going to come up here to the status toolbar and find this little share button. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to choose Upload to FileMaker Server. Now when I do that, I'll get this dialog that says it's going to be closed before proceeding with the upload. That's totally normal. It's just going to close the file. And then it's going to give me this dialog. Now, of course, I already have FileMaker Server installed and ready to go. It's this guy right here. So I'm going to select it. And I'm going to put in my admin console credentials. So this is something that I set up when I installed FileMaker Server. I'll do Next. And I get this dialog here. The file is ready to be uploaded. And it's automatically going to open that database on the server once it's uploaded. So I'll hit that Upload button. And we can see this file is currently being processed and has completed. And you'll notice this little checkbox here. It says Open with FileMaker Pro. So once I hit Done, it's going to open the file from the server. And I have a hosted file. I have access to a hosted file, right? And you can tell because I have the server name in parentheses right to the right of the file name. And so now if one of my colleagues or coworkers wanted to access the same data that I was looking at, they'd be able to. And the thought process behind this is, essentially you set it up once and everybody always has access to the data. It's always available and always ready for you to use. Something like peer-to-peer sharing, you don't really get that. Okay, so let's take a look at what the admin console looks like next. I'm going to open up a web browser. So that's one of the neat things about this is that you can administer it through the web browser, which means theoretically, if you set it up correctly on the network side, you could do it anywhere. So I head to the address that my console is located at, and I'm going to start my admin console. And it'll prompt me for a username and password. And I'm in. I can now administer my server. So I get right off the bat just kind of a status page. It just kind of shows you the health of every module. So I've got FileMaker Server 15 ready, good to go. I've got the green check mark. So it's currently hosting out, able to host out my apps and let people connect to them and share that data. I've got these two modules here, the web server and the web publishing engine, that kind of deals with all the web side of things. So if I were using a web direct or custom web publishing technology, this is where that would come into play. And then down here I have the ODBC and JDBC engine. So if I needed to connect to FileMaker using one of those two protocols, I could do so. I'm going to head over to the activity section next. The activity section just details what databases I have available for FileMaker Server and what clients are currently connected. So right now I have two databases uploaded, and you can see the status is normal, meaning it's currently actively being hosted out. And if I click on it, I can get some information about who exactly is connected at the current moment. So right now I've got just one person, that's me. And if I go to clients, I can confirm that I've got me right here with my IP address and my connect time and my client version. And if I click on user details down here, I'll get an even more in-depth snapshot. So it's a pretty nice little view of your system and your apps. And you could have as up to 125 apps hosted out through one server. So you're certainly not limited to just one app per server or anything of that nature. You could run your contacts and your invoices and whatever else through here. We also have this schedule section. And schedules essentially allow you to perform one of a handful of tasks on a regular basis. So you can see I have 3 set up by default here. FileMaker sets these up for me automatically on install: daily, hourly, and weekly backup schedules. And right now only the daily one is enabled. So that all that's going to do is every day at 11 p.m. It's going to run a backup of all my databases uploaded, right? And that's obviously important. We'll discuss backup schedules a little bit later. Aside from that, you can also do things like send a message to all connected clients on a scheduled basis. You do system level scripts, so shell scripts or batch files. You do FileMaker scripts. So if you have something within your app that you need done on a regular basis, FileMaker has you covered with this FileMaker script schedule. Or you do a script sequence, and a script sequence is kind of a combination of the system level and the FileMaker script. And finally, you can verify the database. So you could, on a regular basis, set up a schedule to verify the integrity of your app. We also have a little statistics module here. You can see statistics on the server side, so things like disk kilobytes per second read and write, network or wait time and input-output time. And obviously this is not going to show you a great deal of information right now. I have a single app uploaded, no real activity going on, so it's not going to give me a lot of information, but you can imagine this would be useful for trying to figure out bottlenecks when you've got a large number of users or apps hosted with complex solutions. We also have a clients tab here, so you can actually log some statistics for clients, individual clients that are connected, kind of see what they're doing at any given time. Really useful little tool there as well. We have a log viewer here, so it just gives you this module just gives you kind of a view into all the logged events that have happened in FileMaker. You've even got a little filter option here, so I can say, show me all the open events today between 6:15 and 6:15. You can also do log events from the web side of things or the server access side of things. Really nice little utility here. And then finally, we have a few settings. So you have kind of three levels of settings here. You have general settings, kind of the information like what's the administrator contact info, or uh, who should we email when, or what email service should we use when we send you an email saying that this schedule is done, that sort of thing. You have database server settings, everything from simultaneous script sessions to number of files to host to folders. You can have different folders for your database or your backups or whatever else you need, and security settings as well. And then finally, some web publishing settings, everything from FileMaker Web Direct session timeouts to PHP character encodings. Okay, so as you're going through your deployment, a really key area that you'll want to think about ahead of time is performance. No one likes using a slow app, and we've had clients who have come to us with lots of pain and suffering on this point. And a lot of times, it could really be easily solved by just looking at a few key areas. The first one to look at is whenever possible, use a dedicated machine for FileMaker Server. That means absolutely nothing else on the machine at all. You don't want to use it as a file server or an email server or an FTP server or any other function. The goal is to have the machine's entire existence dedicated to running FileMaker Server. This is key for a couple of reasons. One being that you just don't want FileMaker Server competing with other applications for resources. If your email server is going haywire for some reason, that's going to choke out FileMaker Server and make your app slow. Another thing to think about is just availability. If you need to restart your server because the FTP server is acting really funny, that means your FileMaker apps go down right along with it. That's going to affect your uptime, and your users aren't going to notice that. If your app is unavailable during the workday, they will definitely notice. They will definitely remember. The hosting industry is obsessed with uptime for a really good reason. Just because people remember these things. You'll also want to keep network traffic in mind. FileMaker Server is not in a bubble. Network traffic in your environment is going to affect it as well. Depending on your bandwidth, things that people are doing on your network could really cause slowdowns and bottlenecks. This is especially going to be something to think about if you have people accessing from outside the network. So if you've got somebody down there at the Starbucks and trying to access your server hosted in your office, things that people are doing on the office's network is definitely going to have an impact there. And you may also want to keep an eye on the app level if you run into any slowdowns. It's typically only something that you'll need to be concerned about when if you have a particularly complicated system or a lot of data, but things can definitely happen on that layer. There's a new feature called FileMaker, called Top Call Statistics Logging. It allows you to see the top 25 slowest requests made in your system over the last period of time, which is really fantastic for pinpointing the exact area causing performance on the app level. So if you do run into performance issues and you suspect the app level, definitely check out that Top Call Statistics Logging feature. Next, I'd like to talk about the system requirements and kind of capacity in general. Right here we have the system requirements for FileMaker Server, both the minimum and the recommended. And true to the name, I would of course recommend going with the recommended settings. The 4-core processor and the 8 gigs of RAM. And another quick note on this: if you're going the dedicated machine, if you're not going the dedicated machine route for whatever reason, make sure you have enough capacity for both FileMaker Server as well as whatever you're running. Again, if at all possible, your life is going to be easier with the dedicated machine, but we understand that's not always going to be the case. Upload and download speed is another item that you'll want to think about relating to performance. If FileMaker Server is hosted on a network that doesn't have a great connection speed, that's definitely a potential for a bottleneck. Again, this is really the same kind of thing. This is really only going to be a big concern if you're accessing from outside the network. Internal networks usually have a lot more bandwidth available to them than if you were traveling outside the network or into the network from the outside. So I know kind of dealing with some of that performance stuff can be a little bit daunting, and hosting in general can. If it is, you may want to look into third-party hosting, because a lot of those items can be taken off your plate. So the idea here is to basically offload the installation and maintenance of FileMaker Server to another company, usually for a monthly fee. I want to focus on this top bullet point for a moment: save time and money. This is not really a way to circumvent necessarily buying a license. You usually still have to do that for hosting with FileMaker 15. The time you save is with the installation, configuration, and maintenance that's involved with the server. And the money is in the upfront hardware costs and the bandwidth upgrades and whatever else you need. You're basically outsourcing that task to an expert who can do things more efficiently. We find that a lot of organizations do come out ahead in the end going third party, especially if they just don't have the time or the expertise to run and maintain a server. And of course, since you don't have to worry about the server side of things with third-party hosting, it does free up more time for the plan and the create phase, and kind of deploying your apps faster. Essentially, you have just less to worry about when the deployment phase comes around. Now, MainSpring doesn't offer hosting with FileMaker Server 15, but we do offer assistance with the deploy process, including setting up and configuring server installations. That might be a good option for organizations that might want or need initial assistance, but want to maintain the server themselves. Otherwise, if you're interested in full managed hosting, I would recommend checking out the partners section of the FileMaker website. They do have hosting providers up there. So now that you have your server sorted out, it's time to think about data sources. If you're starting from absolutely nothing, this isn't something that you need to worry about, but that's rarely the case. Typically, we find that organizations start with a collection of Excel documents or some rigid proprietary system that they've outgrown and decide to go custom to better organize and share information important to them. Of course, we don't want to start from scratch. That existing data is valuable no matter where it's from. And luckily, FileMaker offers us the ability to import that information from wherever. If that information is stored as an Excel document or an XML set of XML documents, or even a fully relational database system like MySQL, FileMaker can import that in. Let's take a quick look at how this process might look for a really simple import from an Excel document. I have my custom app still up here. And I have an Excel document over here on my desktop with a bunch of randomly generated contact information. And I'm going to just kind of import that right to my system. So I'm going to come up here to the File menu, choose Import Records, and choose File. And select my contacts document. And I'm going to arrange this by, I'm going to choose Don't Import First Record, because obviously my Excel doc has the first record as field names, and I'm going to do arrange by matching names. And the idea here is on the left, I have my source fields from the Excel document, and on the right, I have my FileMaker fields. And we're just putting them right in there and creating new records for each Excel row. So I'll click Import here, and I'll check this box off and hit Import again. And in just a few seconds, I'll have 8,000 plus new contacts in my system. Not a whole ton of effort there for, essentially now my custom app is really useful because all my contacts are right there and ready to use. Now, if you have other data sources and systems that you intend to kind of keep and maintain alongside FileMaker, you may be able to do a full integration between those systems and FileMaker. One way to do this is a feature called External SQL Sources, and it offers you the ability to establish and maintain a live connection to some other relational database systems like MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle and others. There's a bit more of a setup to this side of things, but you can find more information on this by clicking on the OWC/JDBC integration overview link on the data sources page in the deploy guide. So circling back to the whole concept of deploy being a step within the plan phase and this whole process being cyclical in general, um, you are going to plan out your updates, you're going to implement them, and you're going to deploy them. And you're going to do that whole process again. You're going to start planning out your updates. Eventually, you're going to do another deployment. Using FileMaker's scripting engine, you can ease that deployment process a bit by scripting your imports. So we actually do this for virtually every client since we follow that exact same, plan, create, deploy process. It turns getting ready for deploying an updated application into a button press task instead of a monotonous manual import process. The idea is basically if you have a V1 and you're about to deploy a V2, script the import from V1 to V2. That way, when you go from V2 to V3, you just hit the same import button again, that same import script. So a really useful tool there if you do have frequent updates, which you likely will. So another important step when you're planning out the deploy phase is to figure out what you need to buy. FileMaker has made this really easy with a program called FileMaker Licensing for Teams. You're basically just picking the number of users you have in tiers of 5 and purchasing that. It includes FileMaker Server and allows each user to connect with either FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Go, or FileMaker WebDirect. Of course, if you'll be doing development in any capacity, I would recommend additionally investing in FileMaker Pro Advanced. The features it offers to developers are really priceless. To say that development would be difficult without some of the features specific to FileMaker Pro Advanced would be a really serious understatement. If, for whatever reason, you think that FileMaker licensing for Teams doesn't quite fit your organization, I would highly recommend speaking with a FileMaker sales team. There are other options out there that may be better suited to your organization. Another thing to consider when you're planning out your deployment is what kind of server deployment configuration you'd like to use. Now, for the vast majority of cases, a one-machine deployment is going to be perfect. That means the 3 components here, the web server, the web publishing engine, and the database server, all get installed on one machine. This is what you would typically use if you have all FileMaker Pro and Go clients, or mostly FileMaker Pro and Go clients with some light to moderate web usage. The alternative is a 2-machine deployment, and that's when you take 2 of those components, the web server and the web publishing engine, and you install them on a different machine entirely. You'll want to do this if you can anticipate both heavy FileMaker Pro and Go usage as well as moderate to heavy web usage. The idea behind this is to let the worker machine focus exclusively on handling the web side of things, and the master machine focus exclusively on serving up data and dealing with the Pro and Go clients. Again, it's typically not necessary to set this up, and you can always set it up later, if you find that the web clients are having an adverse effect on the performance of your FileMaker clients. But it's not something that I would recommend jumping to immediately unless you're familiar with that need and can really anticipate a lot of both the web and the pro clients. Now, on the authentication side of things, there's 2 options for handling authentication against your app. The first one is to use local FileMaker accounts and manage the user accounts on an app-by-app basis. So you can find this option here under the File menu, Manage, and Security. So I'll authenticate here so I can take a look at this. And I've got my existing accounts here. You can see I have 1 guest account that's not active and 1 admin account that is active. I'm going to create a new account, and I'll call it Ryan Klenk. Right? You can see it's a local FileMaker file account. So that's a local account. I'll give it a password, kind of a default password, and I'll also say make sure they have to change it when they first log in, and then I can give it a privileged set of data entry only. Right, so it's pretty easy to manage. The downside is that you have to do it on an app-by-app basis. So if you have one user with an account, you'll want to go ahead and set them up as a user in every other app that you have hosted as well. So click OK on that. and I've got myself a brand new account in that file. Now, alternatively, you could also do external authentication. If your organization has Active Directory or Open Directory set up, you can manage all your users there and let FileMaker authenticate against that. This is a nice option because it's one less password for the end user to remember and one less account for you to manage. Typically, when we deal with a large organization, we're using external authentication. The infrastructure is already there in those cases, and system administrators love it because, again, it's one less thing on their plate. And that's pretty easy to set up as well. So instead of, it's the same place, File, Manage, Security, but instead of choosing local FileMaker file, you choose external server, and you're not setting up a single account, you're setting up a privilege set for a group of accounts, right? So I could say managers, for example, and give them full access. I click OK on that, authenticate again, and I've got myself a manager's privilege set there. Of course, it's not going to work quite yet. There's one additional step for external authentication. That's come into your trusty FileMaker Server admin console, head over here to the database server section, security, and change this client authentication from FileMaker accounts only to FileMaker and external server accounts. Some other important notes on security. SSL. So this is the same technology that protects your credit card information from being grabbed out of the air by someone when you do online shopping. It protects information in transit. In order to use SSL in a production environment in FileMaker, you need to purchase a third-party SSL certificate. So this is basically something issued by an authority that others recognize as legitimate, and that backs you up when you say you are who you say you are. There is a link in the authentication section of the deploy guide that will take you to a list of supported SSL certificates. So that's especially going to be important if you're dealing with something like, medical information or social security numbers. But realistically, all your information is important and it should all be protected. There's also a feature called encryption at rest. This is actually something that you'll need FileMaker Pro Advanced to use, but it'll make it so that if someone were to somehow get a hold of your file, they wouldn't be able to get in without a key that you set. Making these 2 points a priority in your deployment plan will go a long way towards ensuring a secure system. Next, you'll want to determine a backup strategy. And I'm going to say right off the bat, we're going to cover 3 of them, and all 3 should be used in conjunction with each other. So the first one we'll talk about here are scheduled backups. And we've already gotten a little bit of a preview of this. That's back here on the scheduled side of things, these backup schedules right here. You can essentially set up these to be completely custom however often you want. You could do every 2 hours or every 3rd Tuesday of the month kind of thing. Whatever you need to do, you can set this up. They're very flexible. And the idea is essentially you choose a backup folder. So where exactly am I going to keep these backups? A number of backups to keep. So in this case, we're keeping 7. So for 7 days, we'll have a backup. And then on the 8th day, the oldest backup goes away effectively, and the newest backup is put in there. And then whether or not to verify and clone the backup. You can also set up, things like repeating the task or a start date or an end date. Typically you're not going to have an end date with your backup schedules. You should always have backup schedules running no matter what. But you could do a frequency as well here. Give it a schedule name, and you can even set an email notification to make sure that if it does fail for some reason, which never really happens, but if it does, you could have an email notification that'll tell you that. So that's a really important part of your backup strategy is those scheduled backups, just setting them up in FileMaker Server and letting it kind of manage that part of it. There's also a feature called progressive backups. And the idea behind progressive backups is that it just tracks the changes since the last backup. So this is a lot more of a frequent thing. This is more like 5 minutes intervals as opposed to daily or hourly intervals. It will keep one copy ready for you to use, so one copy is always there ready to go, and one copy that has the changes written to. So when setting it up, you're typically, as I mentioned, you're going to pick something like 5 minutes or 6 minutes or something like that. Whatever time frame you're going to be able to actually get to those files by. And then finally, third-party backups. And third-party backups are not something that you would ever use by themselves. You don't want third-party backups backing up live database files, the actual hosted apps. That would cause some serious issues down the road. Instead, what you do with third-party backups is you point them to the scheduled backup files and have those backed up via that way. So the idea here is you do your regular backups with FileMaker scheduling system, and then use your third-party backup solution to move it off-site or to a different server at a different location. The goal with third-party backups is to avoid your server being the single point of failure, right? So good idea to have all three in conjunction with each other. For disaster recovery, FileMaker has a feature called Standby Server. And Standby Server allows you to set up a separate but identical FileMaker server that will take over should something happen to your primary one. So this is a really fantastic tool for protecting against downtime. And you can even do things like switch it over manually to do maintenance on one and then switch back over later. So if downtime is, or uptime is a really important part of your organization, which I think a lot of organizations it is, I would highly recommend looking at a standby server as part of your deployment plan. So these next couple of slides are taken right from the deploy guide. They're things that you'll want to talk to your system administrator about. To highlight just a couple of these, this first one we've already discussed, but it definitely bears repeating. That very first one under the required hardware and software section. Check that you have the right hardware and software for the FileMaker platform to perform efficiently. Again, this means a dedicated machine. This means enough RAM and CPU. This means the right operating system. It's really important to keep these things in mind. You don't want to be slow right off the bat. And then finally, down here under the network configuration, this very last item, determine if you need help forwarding ports 5003, 80, 443 in the router. This is important if you anticipate needing to access your system from outside your office. Most people find this ability especially useful. Being able to go from Starbucks and connect right to your system. Having your information available and ready to use no matter what the time and the place is really huge. So keep that one in mind. Talk to your system administrator about that one, and they'll be able to help you with it. And finally, a few more checklists. Again, pay special attention to the security section. These are especially important topics to speak with your system administrator about. Okay, let's go ahead and open this up to some Q&A. You can go to the webinar control panel, click on the question section, enter your question, and click on send. If you haven't entered your question, that's okay. We're going to cover some additional resources to give you some time to do so. For those of you that prefer a visual map to the series, here's what the three guides look like at a glance and a URL to take you to all three. And with that, I'm going to hand this back off to Ryan Klenk.
Thanks, Ryan. Fantastic demo and a lot of great information there. So let's cover a few additional resources. To start off, if you have any questions related to the presentation, feel free to get in touch with Ryan Klenk at rklenk, that's R-K-L-E-N-K, at GoMainSpring.com. And if you have any assistance needed, or you want any assistance building out or deploying your app, you're welcome to get in touch with MainSpring at hello@GoMainSpring.com. There's additional free content, additional webinars at FileMaker.com/learning/webinars page. And you can also check out FileMaker's training page for additional links for instructor-led or self-paced training. And finally, if you feel like you're ready to discuss licensing, give us a call at 1-800-725-2747. All right, so we'll go ahead and start jumping into some questions. And to start off, Ryan, we have a few questions about installation locations. To start off, can I deploy in a terminal services environment, and how would that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea behind a terminal services environment is, you have FileMaker Server on your regular FileMaker Server machine, just like you would in any other deployment. But your pro users all come in through a terminal server machine and then connect to the FileMaker Server from there. So that's a great option, for especially security conscious firms or resource conscious firms. It definitely works with FileMaker.
All right, the next question. Can FileMaker Server run on a virtual machine?
Yeah, it absolutely can. It's again as simple as installing it just like you normally would. MainSpring sometimes uses the Amazon EC2 systems, which is basically a virtual machine as well, to run some of our FileMaker Server machines, and it works really perfectly well. Again, as long as the machine meets the minimum system requirements that we covered earlier and is the correct operating system, it'll certainly work well.
Perfect. Next question about SQL connections. Ryan, are SQL connections supported in both FileMaker Go and WebDirect?
So yes, through the server. If you set it up on the server side of things and kind of utilize that connection through the server end, it'll absolutely work. But it's not something that you're going to be able to do directly from a local FileMaker Go app to an external SQL source or anything like that. So yes, with a but.
Right, so you can see that data. All right, the next question, kind of still in the realm of that FileMaker Go and WebDirect. Why should you choose to deploy FileMaker Pro versus WebDirect versus FileMaker Go?
I don't think it's really an either or. I think it's kind of I think you should probably aim to use all three. I think they all serve different purposes. I think FileMaker Pro should be your default, right? It's going to have the full featured experience. I think FileMaker Go is for when you're on the go with your mobile device, and I think FileMaker WebDirect is for that backup scenario, that kind of no frills, give me the data and I'm going to go. I think that's really the key there.
Okay, and the next question, is FileMaker Go strictly for iOS?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
If you sorry, I was just going to add to that. If you needed Android options, I think WebDirect in FileMaker 15 actually has some improvements, so it's a good enough solution for some Android browsers as long as you meet those requirements. But for the most part, if you're mobile, I think generally I'd recommend trying for an iOS device if you can, so you can use FileMaker Go.
Perfect. All right, the next question. What are the steps I need to take to export a full copy of my solution and migrate it to another FileMaker server?
So essentially taking your app and just moving it from one server to another. Pretty simple process. I mean, you don't really have to do a whole lot of work there because everything is all contained in typically a nice, neat little FileMaker file. So if you're moving it from one server to another, it's just as simple as moving the file itself.
All right, the next question. Can you have different levels of permission for externally authenticated accounts?
Absolutely, yeah. So you externally authenticated accounts just function on the group level, and you can effectively put in a group and set a privilege set just like you would with any regular normal local FileMaker account.
Okay, and the next question. Can you touch on why we'd want to use FileMaker Server instead of keeping your solution in something like Dropbox or a shared drive?
Yeah, so Dropbox and shared drives and the like, they just don't have the things like collision detection and record locking mechanisms in place like FileMaker Server does. So you have a whole lot of potential for conflicts. If I am editing a record and you edit that same record, we have the potential to overwrite one another's changes. And FileMaker Server has specific functions built in to prevent against that sort of stuff.
Perfect. All right, the next question. Do I need FileMaker Pro Advanced to develop a solution, or can I just use FileMaker Pro?
You can use FileMaker Pro to develop your solution. You absolutely can. I almost always recommend just get FileMaker Pro Advanced. It's not that much more expensive, and like I said, the features that you get from it are just priceless. Things like the script debugger and the data viewer really make your day-to-day development life a lot easier. So if you're going to be doing a lot of development at all in FileMaker, definitely go with the advanced. But it's definitely possible to do it with Pro.
Excellent. All right, well, that's all the time we have for today. On behalf of Ryan Klenk, on behalf of FileMaker, it was our absolute pleasure chatting with you guys today. We definitely hope you learned something, and we definitely hope to see you on another webinar soon. Have a great day.